Hello, my Misty friends out there. Have you ever wondered if it's a good time to buy or should you wait for a better price? Stick around and I'm going to show you how I determine and the items and the indicators that I look at that help me to determine whether I'm going to wait for a better price or go ahead and look to purchase more shares. Stay tuned. We'll get right into that. Hello, my friends. This is Legend. So today we're going to talk about how I determine and the indicators that I use to help me decide if it is a good buy price or should I be patient and wait for a better price. Now, of course, none of this is guaranteed, and I am not a financial advisor. This is just me giving and showing my thoughts and the indicators that I use to help me to determine whether it is a good buy price or not. So let's just go ahead and slide over to the Webull chart and get started. All right, so here we are on the Webull chart. And before we jump in, if you don't mind, please hit that subscribe button. And if you like this kind of content about Misty, then don't forget to smash that like button as well. So here we're showing our Misty chart, and these are the two orange lines we drew in before. That was our upper resistance line, and this is our kind of current resistance line where it has hit a few times. And if we can break that, then hopefully we can go up here and start testing this $23.42 resistance. And as you can see, we did have a little bit more momentum, and we are crossed up on the MACD, and the RSI 14 is at 51. So we are slap dab in the middle on the RSI. So that's kind of currently where we're at right now. But how do you know when is a good time to buy? Or how do I know when's a good time for me to buy? So this is just some of the things that I look for whenever I'm evaluating when to buy a stock. And anytime I'm looking to buy, I don't necessarily want to buy on the high side. I prefer to buy low to help average myself down. Now, to know when to average myself down or when I can buy that would help me average myself down, I have to also keep track of my average. And I do that with my spreadsheet. And this is my spreadsheet that I use that helps me to keep an average of my current purchase price share. So that basically each time that I buy at a certain dollar value and I buy a number of shares, and that calculates how much I spend on each purchase point. And it calculates that and it keeps track of that. And now that's the purchase per share average. And this one over here is my adjusted price per share. Now that takes into account of all my distributions and premium that I earned and gives me a new adjusted price per share versus the purchase price per share, if that makes sense. So this is what I've actually paid out to buy the shares, but I have earned distributions and premium. So calculating that into that price, subtracting that out of my initial capital invested, gives me $6.64 per share versus the $25.21. Now, if I can purchase Misty for under $6.64, then I would be really averaging down, right? Because at that point, that would help me to even bring down my adjusted price per share. Now, Misty currently, as you can see up here at the top, is at $21.23. This is after hours price. It is a Friday and the market is closed. And $6.64, I don't see that happening anytime soon. But this $25.21 price, okay, that's my actual purchase average. So if I can purchase shares under that price, it will bring this down. It'll bring the $25.21 down. It will raise up the $6.64 because that is above that $6.64. The $21.23 is above the $6.64, so therefore it will raise that up. But that will keep coming down the more premium and the more distributions that I earn. But like I said, I have to at least purchase under my purchased per share price. So I need to buy it under the $25.21. If you can buy yours under your adjusted purchase price, do that. For me, at $6.64, I don't see MSTY at that price anytime soon. So I'm looking for at least under the $25.21. So the current price being $21.23, that does satisfy that criteria. Now, if you're looking to also be able to track yours, you can easily get that sheet, and that link will be in my description below. And for the efforts of me building the sheet, I only ask that you buy me a cup of coffee, and by doing that, you'll also earn the ability to download that sheet, and you'll use it. It's a Google sheet, and you can use that to also track your average prices. So current price being below our purchase price, that's the first criteria met. So now let's go back to our charts. Now we know that this price is below our average. So that's the first thing we look for. But is it a good time to buy right now? Just because it is under my average, it may not be the right time to get it. So let's just look at the indicator called the Bollinger Band. And to do that, since we're going to look at indicators, I'm going to flip my chart to an adjusted chart. Right now we are on actual. So this is the actual movement of those candles. And I use the actual whenever I'm trying to set in your resistance lines and your support lines. But for looking for indicators, I like to use the adjusted chart. So to do that, I'll just go to my chart settings, axis, y-axis here, and switch actual to adjusted. Hit done, and now we are looking at the adjusted chart. Now for this one, and just to help clean this up a little bit, we'll go ahead and we will remove the resistance lines that we had drawn in there. And I'm going to turn on the Bollinger Band, and we're going to now look to see if it's the right timing to buy the stock. And again, this is my opinion, and this is the things that I look for. So we are right here on this candle. This is the Bollinger Band. The white is the upper part of the Bollinger Band. The blue is the mid point, and the yellow is the bottom of the Bollinger Band. Okay, so when we get these candles, when they move up toward the top up here, now you're getting at the top of the Bollinger Band, and the stock itself likes to and wants to stay somewhere in the middle. It wants to stay in between these bands, but it definitely wants to stay toward the middle. The middle is like a little magnet. So as it gets further and further away, it wants to pull back toward that magnet, okay? Now, it could continue to break on out of the Bollinger Band. That could happen. Or break down below the Bollinger Band. And that can happen. But it does like to stay somewhere in the middle of that Bollinger Band. So when I'm looking at a stock to purchase, so the first thing I like to look at is it below the midpoint of that Bollinger Band? I like to purchase my shares when it is below the mid, and the closer to the bottom of the Bollinger Band, the better. Because if it wants to try to move back toward the midpoint, then buying it down here at the bottom is going to be better. Now, if I didn't use the Bollinger Band, if we turn that off and you're looking at it, you really don't know when to buy and when to sell, right? And no, I don't necessarily want to sell MSTY, but how do I know when to buy? I like to buy when it's low, but how do you know when it's actually going to get low, right? Do you call this low? I don't know, right? So that's why I use the Bollinger Band. Bollinger Band helps to see, and I get more of a signal of where it's at. Because when it's coming down, and if all I saw was that red candle right there, this red candle right here, is at a good buy point. Because it was up here and now it dropped down here. Should I buy it at that point? Well, I'm not saying that you shouldn't or that you can't, because it could have went here and then shot straight on up and took off. But with my Bollinger Band, it helps me to help determine when I should buy. So for instance here, you can see on this big red candle, it broke down below the Bollinger Band, and it was under the RSI 2. it was under 10 on the RSI2 right here. It was at 6.75 and outside the bottom side of that Bollinger Band. And it went as low as $16.01. So when it broke down and outside that Bollinger Band, that could have been a very good time to buy. Of course, the next day it shot right back up to the midpoint of that Bollinger Band. So, I mean, unless you just happened to catch it that day, you have missed it out by the next day. And then we're back up to somewhere close to the midpoint of that Bollinger Band. So, in my opinion, I'm not wanting to buy when it's around the mid. I prefer to buy when it's at the bottom of that Bollinger Band. And it's been at the bottom over here. Looks like it got as low as about $15.60. And it was over here, it was actually low as well, right? Now we were on a downward fall right here. So that's got to be taken into consideration. After that huge fall, you might not want to have bought in because even though this one came out the Bollinger Band, you didn't know, is it still coming down? Because that was during the February fall time where everything was falling down. So that one there might have been a little difficult to buy. It was really hard to buy anything during that time. You kind of wanted to wait and see what was going to happen because each day it just kept falling. But then it started kind of settling out and then it popped up and then it's back at close to that Bollinger Band here. And then now we've dropped down back below that Bollinger Band here. And now currently we are on between the mid and upper. So for me, I'm a hold with the current price. I prefer it below the mid and closer to the bottom, if that makes sense. That way, if I'm buying it and I'm buying it somewhere around here and it wants to stay somewhere right in here, at least I'm going to get a little bit of price appreciation, right? Not that I'm selling the stock, but I don't necessarily want to just buy shares just to be buying shares. I don't want to keep buying my shares up here, right? Because this thing's moving on up and you're thinking, oh man, I missed out. Jump in, buy more shares, buy more shares. Here it is, at $21.98 on this candle. And then all of a sudden it started falling back down. And you're like, oh man, every time I buy, this thing falls. Well, that's because it was at the top of that Bollinger Band. And the little blue magnet down here is, it's wanting to pull it back down. And it did. It pulled it right back down to that blue line. So what I'm looking at is the Bollinger Band and that RSI2. Now over here you can see it did drop below the 10 on the RSI2. Right here and right here. But it was still somewhat above or at that midpoint of the Bollinger Band. So just because it dropped down below the 10 on the RSI2 does not mean that's an immediate buy. That just means it's a potential buy, but then you need to also look at that Bollinger Band. And if it was down here toward the bottom of that Bollinger Band and below that 10, then yes, I would have considered that as a buy, just like it was right here. But as you can see, for Thursday's close, we closed at $21.23. Our RSI2 is currently at 91.77. So on the short term, we are overbought. That does not mean that we will go down because on a RSI 14, we're only at 56. So there's plenty of more room to move on up. But on the short term, we are overbought. So for me, since this is on the upper side of this Bollinger Band, I'm at a hold. I prefer it on this bottom side of the Bollinger Band, preferably toward that lower Bollinger Band. So anyway, I think I just wanted to let you know just some of the things that I look at. I know there's been people wondering, when's the right time to buy? When's the right time to get into MSTY? Maybe you don't even have any shares in MSTY and you are interested into getting a few shares just to try it out, but you don't know when's the right time. Well, that is a decision you have to make. No one else can make that. But the indicators that I look at is the RSI2 and that Bollinger Band. If that Bollinger Band has that candle in that bottom half, preferably toward the bottom of that lower side of that Bollinger Band, and that RSI2 is below 10 or close to it, then for me, that could be a potential entry point. So again, if you want to get a hold of that spreadsheet that I showed, check down into the description area and you'll see that link to get that spreadsheet. So I think I'm going to wrap it up right there. If you don't mind hitting that subscribe button and smash that like button, it'd be much appreciated. And as always, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please do your own due diligence before you get into any stock plays. And until next time, Legend out.